Hi, everyone. Welcome to our last of our Global Science Policy webinar series. My name is Brittany Webster, and I'm the Assistant Director for Science Policy and Government Relations at AGU. And in my role, I set and lead our policy and advocacy work, especially on the domestic side. So to start us off, I just want to make sure everyone has had the opportunity to weigh in on AGU's 25-26 policy priorities. And we really use these policy priorities to be proactive and effective on Capitol Hill, but as we increasingly go into the global policy space, they're really informative in that regard as well. And we're asking all of you, our AGU community, to weigh in on our policy priorities to make sure that the work we're doing represents your interests and your priorities. So please take maybe later, click the link, or right now, use your phone to capture that URL code so that you can help us set our agenda for this next new exciting legislative landscape. So thank you again for joining us today for our Science to Action preparing for COP29. It's very interesting because another COP is happening right now, so it's just a very busy year for global policy talks that have a big impact on science. Excuse me. And as I mentioned, this is the fourth of our 2024 Global Policy Webinar Series. You can find the other three webinars on our AGU's YouTube channel in the Science Policy playlist. So we start off the year with a recap of COP28 and how to participate in COP29. We did two kind of skills building sessions, one on how to write a policy brief, the third on science diplomacy skills. And now here we are today to talk about the next COP. During our panelist talks today, please use the Q&A function to ask questions at any time. You can also upvote questions. And yes, the recording will be posted to AGU's YouTube channel. And with that, we're just going to dive right in. I'm really excited that we have our two speakers here today. I think they have some really interesting perspectives, and I know I'm looking forward to their remarks. So first, I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Gianpaolo Balsamo, who serves as a director at the World Meteorological Organization and joined in 2024 to lead the Global Greenhouse Gas Watch, G3W. This new flagship initiative supports the implementation of the Paris Agreement through the use of Earth observations and Earth science models. G3W is dedicated to providing authoritative and precise data to support the global stocktake and the nationally determined contributions under the enhanced transparency framework of the Paris Agreement. That was quite a statement. Before this role, Balsamo coordinated the CO2 Human Emission European Project, a precursor to the Copernicus CO2 service, CO2. Balsamo holds a PhD and a professorial accreditation from the University Paul Sabatier Toulouse III in Earth System Science and is an invited professor for the Climate Change Solutions Master's Program at the Politecnico di Torino. I swear I practiced, but I knew I was going to butcher that regardless. And with that, I will turn it over to our first speaker.
Thank you very much. So it's Brittany, it's a pleasure to be here with AGU. Thanks to all that are connecting and curious to listen to our preparation to COP29. So as you said, I'm Gianpaolo Balsamo. I'm a director since January 2024. I started here in Geneva at the World Meteorological Organization. I'm in the infrastructure department. So the infrastructure department look after the global observation infrastructure and also the modeling, which are basically in the premises of what the WMO represents. So the weather, the climate, and the environment application. So we have among our perimeters of responsibility, we are responsible, or we represent 193 nations and territories at WMO. And you will see in terms of our flagships or the I would say the things we push forward as key messages and key effort. We work towards early warning system that works for all. You will hear very often this label, early warning for all. And this is a partnership between WMO, UN Disaster Reduction Unit, and Red Cross and other partners. And also we are, as you mentioned, we have pushed forward this new flagship, the Global Greenhouse Gas Watch, which is an important complementary action. So you could consider that the work of the World Meteorological Organization, we are talking about 151 years. So it exists as an international organization. First was called IMO, and then 1945 it took the name of WMO, the World Meteorological Organization. But it's the bread and butter of the organization is really to organize and coordinate the global effort for weather, and in that sense both the observation part and also the prediction part, and climate. So all the observations that allow us to monitor the climate, that feed into the so-called climate reanalysis, and then that are able to feed into information product, like for instance the global state of climate, which was released earlier this year, and that allow us to have a consensus on the climate change signal across different data set. What makes WMO a strong organization is really the network of expert and partner, and a lot of these information products that you will see from WMO are really thanks to our expert networks. Last few weeks, you might have seen also the global state of water, which was released from WMO. Now we are very much excited in preparing for COP29. So a small delegation from WMO will travel to Baku. I'm honored and really thrilled to be part of this delegation in my role as director of the Global Greenhouse Gas Watch. We are preparing on multiple fronts. So for instance, we have our own pavilion that will be set up in Baku. And this is there for the entire duration of the 2 weeks. And we have a very rich calendar of event. For anybody that will come to Baku, our pavilion will be just next to the UNFCCC. So it's quite a prominent location, and it has, as I was saying, a rich program with a lot of events and a lot of eminent guests and personalities, and also experts of the scientific world. So WMO is very much science-driven organization, and at the service of our member state. During Baku, during the event, I will stay the whole first week, and I will present, for instance, at the Earth Information Day, which is really a very important moment during the week immediately after the plenary session of the Substar committee. So on the first day during the afternoon, there will be the Earth Information Day, and we just had the teleconference this afternoon with our colleague from UNFCCC preparing the program. They made an excellent session, and I'm very, very much looking forward to that moment. I was witnessing, I was participating to COP in previous year, always through the digital medium. So I was a remote participant, and this year I will be on site in Baku. And for me, it's particularly exciting to be there. My past is a past of a climate scientist. So I worked before joining the WMO. I worked for 18 years at the European Weather Center, so ECMWF, which is has its headquarters in the United Kingdom. And as you were mentioning, I was really one of the contributors also from the science point of view of the monitoring system, the monitoring prototype system that the European Commission is delegating to expert institutes like CNWF, so the European Weather Center, the European Space Agencies, and the European Meteorological Satellite Agency, so EUMETSAT and ESA, together with ECMWF, are really pushing forward this prototype for a CO2 monitoring and verification support capacity that will be able to monitor CO2 emissions and concentrations. And this is only one side of the global greenhouse gas watch. So it's the European effort, and there is an exciting effort going on the United States of America, which is, officially, I would say, started with the GHG-MIS, so the Greenhouse Gas Monitoring Information System that the White House Science and Technology Office has issued in terms of vision paper last year, just before COP28. We have a lot of coordination call with our US colleagues that are really active in the area of monitoring in a systematic way the greenhouse gases. And the key partner there are NOAA, so and NASA, among the observation and modeling excellence in the USA, and also there is a lot of support from academia. But I will be meeting with our colleagues from NOAA and NASA, and also our Earth observation expert from the working group on climate, which is reuniting both the coordination group on Earth observation and the coordination group for meteorological satellites. So two very, very important global coordination effort for the satellite data. So it is really an exciting phase for the global greenhouse gas watch, because these two reality, together with a third development, which is equally important and well developed on the side of Japan, involving the Japan Meteorological Agency and Japan Space Agency and several others partners on the side of Japan. They are composing three monitoring system in the globe, which will aim at providing systematic estimate for the greenhouse gases. So this will form a part of the Global Greenhouse Gas Watch in terms of the data provision. And we are forming now the teams that are going to support this effort. So we have now nominated through the WMO processes the chair and the advisory group members, and we are now forming the task teams that will support, for instance, the observation side, the modeling side, and the data management side, so data structure, data architecture. So this is where we are at the moment. So there's been a lot of work going on also to pass through what is called the intergovernmental process of WMO, which consists of consultative, very formal, very structured consultative process with all the members who are providing feedback on our implementation plan. And we got the green light on our implementation plan, which was written by around 70 prominent experts on greenhouse gases worldwide. And then we had also the green light from our executive council. This happened just before summer. which gave us really the start to the implementation of the plan, and therefore our mandate to form the teams and to have the expertise that can enable the ambitious implementation plan. So COP29 will be a very, very important moment to meet several of these experts and also meet the stakeholders. So all this data, so the greenhouse gas emissions and concentrations, will go through the channel of the Paris Agreement, so the Enhanced Transparency Framework. There has been already a participation to the first global stock take, which took place last year, and had as a focus the year 2021. So Earth observation combined with inversion modeling were used to provide a first estimate of the emissions over the year 2021. And there is a lesson learned from this first global stock take, also on its uptake from stakeholders. The way the Paris Agreement will work is that this Enhanced Transparency Framework has a cycle of 5 years. So the next global stock take, which will be in 2028, based on the year 2026, will enable already to see with two estimates what are the trends in terms of greenhouse gas emissions also by regional area. And this is an important tool for the Paris Agreement itself, because it goes very often, we say it very often in the G3W, we cannot manage what we don't measure. And for the greenhouse gases, we know there are measurements, historical measurements, like, for instance, the Mauna Loa observatory and several stations that observe greenhouse gas concentration. But we don't have the same global coverage and integration between models, satellites, and point measurements that we have, for instance, for temperature or for precipitation or for many of the weather variables. So we know when we look at weather variables and weather maps, we know that behind those maps for the weather prediction, there are something like 1 billion observation every day entry into the weather model, the weather analysis, which provide the initial point that is used then to do forecast. So this 1 billion observation is really what makes modern climate reanalysis very, very reliable. So it's not a collection of points, it's really a observation of the Earth system in multiple frequency through satellite measurements, through multiple observing platform at the surface, throughout the atmosphere with radio sound, with airplane, with ships, with balloons, with satellites. So there is a picture of the global observing system that is really compelling, and this underpins our for instance, the global state of climate. The climate reanalysis are very robust data, which gives you an estimate of the temperature, with also some estimate of the uncertainty. And the same kind of information is the vision for G3W is what will underpin the global greenhouse gas watch. So that's what I had in mind to tell you about today. So the preparation is ongoing, and then there is a lot of expectation from this COP29. So I mentioned the event on the Monday, which is a first discussion with several groups, which will look at the value of Earth observation for greenhouse gases, but also climate change more broadly, climate change adaptation, climate change mitigation. And it's a very important event on the Monday afternoon. And also we have a session that we organize in our pavilion again on the Saturday. And this will be for me the two big events at the very beginning and at the end of my week at COP. And I'm really excited for both. The event on the Saturday, it is again dedicated to Earth observations, but with several guests providing input on the greenhouse gas watch, but also, for instance, on the global climate observing system, the GCOS, and and invited experts from satellite agencies, from global data providers, and it's a rich event. It's a very interesting event on the Saturday, and I will do my best also to advertise this event, because it will be very much one of the key events. So there are several other events from WMO that you will see on our social media and website announced very shortly. So yeah, maybe this is what I wanted to tell you about Brittany and Beth and everybody connected online.
Thanks so much, Gian Paolo. You kind of answered Beth's question, but I don't know if you want to speak more about when the full calendar of of events at the WMO Pavilion will be released.
Yes, so that we are aiming at releasing very shortly. I would say during next week we will have the announcement. So the calendar internally is populating with the experts. So as I was mentioning from the side of the Earth Information Day, we had confirmation more or less around 2 days. So because it requires also knowing who had succeeded to secure the document arriving back. Also, it's we're trying to give a little bit more certainty to the event. So it will be announced shortly in the next week, and the best would be to keep an eye on the WMO website, and usually our WMO comms is very active also in promoting it through channels like LinkedIn or Facebook or X or other platforms, in order to give ample outreach for this event.
Thank you. So let me share my screen once again. So I'm really happy to announce or introduce our next speaker, Beth Martin. Beth Martin is a teaching professor in environmental studies and a scholar in the Center for the Environment at Washington University in St. Louis, and is currently interim director of Washington University Climate Change Program. She also serves as co-focal point for the Research and Independent Constituency to the UNF's CCC, and is regarded as an expert in the UNF CCC process. Martin teaches courses at the intersection of science, engineering, law, and policy, and has taught in 3 separate schools at the university. Martin is a registered professional engineer and received her master's degree in environmental engineering and a bachelor's degree in civil engineering from Washington University in St. Louis, and holds a bachelor's degree in math from Birmingham Southern College. And with that, I will turn it over to Beth.
Thank you, Brittany. Do you have yeah, you do have my slide, so thanks. If I could I'd love to get a quick show of hands, maybe in the chat. I think everybody has access to the chat. Of those that are here, who is planning on actually attending COP29? And if you could just maybe put a thumbs up or put a yes in the chat. Okay. So I'm not seeing any yeses in the chat, so I'm gonna, oh, unfortunately not. I do see a yes. So I'm gonna try to talk both about if you were attending and what you might be able to see and how things are organized and structured, but also talk about a little bit about how to follow remotely. And I'm happy to take any questions as well. So we can go to the next slide. So Ringo, and so I'm speaking today in my with my Ringo hat on. So Ringo is one of the 9 constituencies of the UNFCCC, and it stands for the Research and Independent Non-Governmental Organizations. Ringo is a non-advocacy constituency, and by that, it means that we don't necessarily advocate as a constituency for any particular outcomes within the negotiations. We will advocate, for example, for transparency, access, participation, and process, but not any particular outcomes. And I think, you can imagine with researchers and scientists across the world and in many different areas that trying to do so might actually be particularly difficult. So what is our mission and purpose though? So mainly as Ringo, we want to highlight the role of social and natural sciences, law and humanities, and other different approaches that increase understandings of climate change. We want to help inform and build capacity, both of parties, but also of other stakeholders and our Ringo members in the UNFCCC negotiations. And we want to help promote stronger links between climate research and policy. So for example, we've begun to share messaging relating to the IPCC as well with our Ringo community in order to kind of help promote those stronger links. We can go to the next slide. So just real quick, I said Ringo is one of the 9 constituencies. So just a primer a little bit, when someone is attending the UNFCCC COP, and this is true whether you're attending as a virtual attendee or whether you're attending as an in-person attendee, the organization that you get your badge from, they are most likely an accredited observer organization. It is possible that a badge may come from a category called party overflow, which is where parties can actually badge people on their own party delegation. But those NGOs are allocated amongst constituencies aligning with interest areas. So for example, you see here of all of the NGOs that are admitted to participate and engage in the UNFCCC process, this shows the breakdown of those, and Ringo is the second largest of those constituencies. The others, just as an FYI, so NGO is the environmental. I'm going clockwise. Farmers. IPO is Indigenous people. LGMA is local governments and municipal associations. TUNGO is trade unions. WGC is women and gender. YOUNGO is youth. And BINGO is business. So those are the categories that most all of the NGO or the observer organizations organize within. And as I said, Ringo is non-advocacy, but all the others are certainly advocacy constituencies and generally are advocating for particular issues or outcomes within the negotiation process. Next slide, please. So what are our goals as Ringo, right, for COP29? So just another highlight, like I said, we're a non-advocacy constituency. So what do we want out of COP? One of the things that's really important to me and the other leadership within Ringo is that we're able to help facilitate individual researcher or Ringo engagement at COP29. So what we find is that a lot of different Ringos or researchers come to participate for a variety of different reasons and have a variety of different goals. But the COP events themselves are really large. They can be overwhelming, and it's sometimes hard to figure out how to meaningfully engage. And so we want people to be able to engage from day one, whether you're participating virtually or whether you're participating remotely. So we do some pre-COP training sessions, and Brittany has these slides, but these are hyperlinked where we talk about the COP process. We have daily coordinating meetings while we're there. Our members take notes on different sessions that they attend, and we also have a set of Ringo thematic groups. And those are groups within Ringo that are organized around particular interest areas. So for example, we have a thematic group on the cryosphere. We have a thematic group on technologies. Okay, so we can go to the next slide. So engagement at COP. So I'm going to kind of quickly go over this one, knowing that most of you won't be attending COP, but there are things to do on a daily basis. You can also be doing some of this. If you have a badge and are able to engage virtually, you'll be able to attend any of the sessions that you would be able to attend actually in person. So that would include negotiation sessions, side events. Exhibits are handled by the presidency and by the individual pavilions, so pavilions and exhibits there. So access to those events depend on what that particular group has set up and constructed. Okay, go ahead and go next to the next slide. So one of the things to think about, whether you're engaging in COP this year or maybe you'll engage in a COP in the future, is to think about what is exactly do I want to accomplish from why I'm there, and understand how your goal fits within the process. And then while you're there, thinking about what you want to attend and who you want to meet. If your goal has to be with following negotiations, and it may or may not be, but if that is, there's certain things to do in order to best understand what's happening in the agenda item that you might be concerned about. So that includes looking at the provisional agenda and the annotations, looking at the daily program each day. And then number 4, and this is something that you can do whether you're badged or not. If you're completely not badged and you still want to follow what's happening on the ground at the COP, these 3 resources I think are tremendous. The first is the Earth Negotiations Bulletin, and they provide a daily update on what are the activities that are happening at the COP under all of the different agenda items. It's done in a reporting, non-advocacy reporting type of a form, and then at the end of the COP, they have a compiled summary of the meeting, and those is a really great resource. The next is the Third World Network. The Third World Network does a series of blogs and briefing papers throughout the COP, and those are terrific resources that chronicle what's happening on particular agenda items. It is coming from the developing world perspective, but it can be a really great way to gain insight into the who wants what and why of different issues that are happening. The third is the CAN Eco. So it's a newsletter put out by the Climate Action Network International, and it provides the environmental NGO perspective on what's happening in the negotiations on a daily basis. So even if you're not a delegate, you're not attending virtually or in person, just checking in on each of these 3 things every day will give you a good sense of kind of the pulse of what's happening. Probably better so than even just reading, what we see in the media. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so this is one that's really more relevant for if you're there and on site. But I do want to kind of give you a quick highlight for those of you who may be interested in going in the future. So when you have a UNFCCC badge and you're able to access the blue zone space, which is the one on the larger area that says UNFCCC badge required. One thing to just know and be aware of is there are a lot of things that are happening concurrently all through the COP. You have the negotiations that are happening related to specific agenda items under the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, under the Kyoto Protocol, and under the Paris Agreement. So you have specific issues moving forward to advancing the work under those treaties. And that happens in the negotiation space. At the same time, though, you also have side events, which is more, what happens in side events is more like a traditional academic conference, where you'll have a panel of experts who are talking about key issues, climate related, and very often related to what's something that may be happening within the negotiation space, or something that the negotiation space may need to be aware of or build upon. Then you also have country offices and pavilions. And so Gianpaolo just talked a little bit about the WMO and their pavilion. And those are really important spaces that also happen at the COP. And that is, the pavilions is where both organizations such as WMO or parties themselves or other NGOs can have a space and a location where they can do programming that is relevant to the work that they do and showcase the work that they do. So I find the WMO Pavilion actually, thank you, very valuable, which is why I was curious about when that schedule would be released. So that can be a really good space as well in terms of kind of making connections and learning and achieving goals maybe that are outside of the actual negotiation space. Okay, let's keep going. Okay, So one of the things that I did want to flag for everyone is that COP is a singular event that happens one time each year, but it is not the only time that work is being done in the UNFCCC or under these treaties. This is kind of an overwhelming graphic, but I put that up to highlight that everything you see on that, maybe that fourth level under Paris Agreement bodies, COP bodies, and Kyoto Protocol bodies, those are all either constituted bodies or work programs that are continuing to do the work related to the UNFCCC throughout the year. And actually, as Ringo's, I find that this is a really important place for researchers to engage. So for example, so the adaptation committee, for example, they're going to be meeting regularly throughout the year to talk about adaptation related issues. And so for researchers that work in adaptation, that's a good place to be engaged. And so those are things that we as Ringo want to make sure that our members or other researchers are aware of those opportunities when they arise, and if they have expertise that fits or works in that space, that they're able to engage in that space. Okay, next slide. Okay, so there are a couple of key substantive issues that I wasn't going to dig into, though I'm happy to answer questions about them, but I will kind of go over briefly what these are. So this COP has been kind of, you may hear about it referred to as the finance COP. And that is in part due to the, I'm trying to, how to phrase that. It has been predetermined that the NCQG, which is a finance goal, which is the new collective quantified goal, which is the amount of total financing that we need, mitigation and adaptation financing that we need, will be set at this particular COP. So that is one of the most important issues that will be discussed and is a priority for the presidency. I'm happy to, if anyone has questions, to kind of talk about where those tensions are in terms of setting that goal. But it comes out of, you may have heard in the press, there was a $100 billion goal for developed countries to provide to developing countries in the context of climate change, which has generally been regarded as insufficient. And so the question now is that they've been working on for the last couple of years and hoping to set is both what should a new goal be, both how much, but also from where and how to access. So there's a lot of questions that have been going on in that. The next is the mitigation work program. So this is a program that's been set up to discuss mitigation activities around that, to provide information back and forth for parties or countries along different mitigation technologies and plans. There's a fair bit of discussion about how and if it should, that particular work program should either align with or support implementation of the mitigation outcomes of the global stocktake, which is that 5-year process where all of the parties measure their progress. And so that just finished last year. There are mitigation outcomes and things that we need to achieve. And there's a lot of debate as to where actually should we be moving that work forward. The next is Article 6, which comes from Article 6 of the Paris Agreement, and it relates to markets. The next is NDCs, which is the nationally determined contributions, which are done on 5-year cycles, and the next set of NDCs are due next year. And so countries should be, after the last GST, be taking that into account and hopefully putting forth NDCs with much higher ambition. And then also from a transparency perspective, this is the year that the new transparency program that was developed as part of the Paris Agreement, the countries are putting out their first reports when those are referred to as BTRs. So I don't think I have an, yep, okay. That was all my slides, but I'm happy to answer any questions. I do see a couple in the chat. Okay, so, okay, 2 questions. The first, what impact does your sponsoring organization have on your attendance, if any? So I'm not sure I understand the question, so I'm going to answer it, but if I'm wrong, Liz, just drop another question back in there. So for example, my organization that I attend COP underneath is my university, my institution, Washington University in St. Louis. So when you attend a COP, you attend on a badge, and that badge is reflective of your organizing institution. So that every attendee has to be badged by someone. So if there's rules about you wearing that badge or having that badge, those would come from that organization, not necessarily from the UNFCCC. So I think hopefully I answered that. How can individuals contribute most effectively to these type of events that you are discussing? So I think one of them is if you want to learn more about these processes, our website, I'll drop it in I'm gonna drop that in the answer. We provide a good bit of information on these activities on our website. But reading those three, going over and reading and following those three resources that I shared previously will give you a good sense of what's happening and what's going on. And then I think you can better determine where your skills and expertise lie and where you might think you might want to engage. And then connecting with someone who's previously worked in the COP space to have that conversation about engagement. That's part of what we do as Ringos. I get emails like that all the time. Like, I do work in this area. How can I engage, or who should I engage with? But first is trying to get a kind of understanding of kind of the nature of the work that's going on there to see where you best fit. How can scientists obtain observer status, and can anyone attend virtually? So observer status is held by an institution, by an organization. So there is a list on the UNFCCC website of all the organizations that have observer status, and I will see if I can drop that in a minute. So to obtain observer status, essentially an organization puts in an application with the Secretariat. It has to meet certain criteria and they have to provide certain information. It goes through the screening with the Secretariat, and then they're provisionally admitted. And then after you're provisionally admitted, there's a decision at the COP where they generally accept all the organizations that have provisional admittance, and then you become an official admitted observer organization. So an individual scientist wouldn't necessarily have observer accreditation, but there would be an organization through which an individual would be able to access the space. Can anyone attend virtually? Yes and no. So the no part is that there are certain events at COP that do require a badge. You can get a virtual badge so that you have a badge and you can attend and access those spaces that do require badges. Again, you have to get those badges through an observer organization, and they have a virtual badge allocation. And when you do that, you get access to the platform and the system that lets you then log in. And for most, it's just a watch. There's not usually a typical join, though every once in a while there will be certain meetings that you can join, but most it's just to watch and observe those spaces. Those you need a badge for. That said, there are certain activities that you do not need a badge for that are open with public webcast. So the plenary sessions, so the opening sessions of each of the bodies are always publicly webcast. At the opening of that, they're going through the agendas. So, if you're a process geek, then that can be really interesting. If you're not, that can be really boring. But that also can be a time where countries are sharing what their positions are with respect to what they want to see those outcomes. So listening to the groups and the parties speak at the end of the opening can be interesting. On occasion, there may be an agenda fight about a topic that's really important for certain countries or parties to have or to see on the agenda. That happened 2 years ago with respect to loss and damage, and whether that should be elevated to an actual agenda item. So, but those are always publicly, they're actually on demand. You can go back and watch them from previous years. So those opening and closing plenary sessions are always available and on demand. Typically, side events are also just available and on demand. So for example, I have I'm teaching a class of students on the IPCC actually this semester, and while I'm at COP, I want them to watch some of the events, which is partly why I'm interested in the WMO Pavilion. But I want them to watch some of the events where the IPCC is either talking or featured to begin to think about that intersection between the IPCC and the UNFCCC. And those should be open, or generally open. At least last year, the WMO Pavilion, you were able to access those events on demand. And the UNFCCC site events are usually able to access those on demand. And so those you can access without a badge.
Oh, Gianpaolo?
Something I should have said, actually, our pavilion, I said WMO pavilion, but it's shared between WMO and IPCC. So we have a common pavilion, and also the Mary Foundation. So it's for the arrangement at Baku this year, this is the pavilion we have. So WMO, IPCC, and Mary Foundation. And it's, therefore the program is also alternated with session with the IPCC. So I posted in the chat the link to the WMO COP29 page, where there will be the calendar very soon, because it's being finalized. I found super interesting your presentation, Beth. I really think super informative. And also you mentioned is the climate finance or the finance COP. So this is, could you say a little bit more? I was really curious of this. It's, I know that there are targets there. It's, and for instance, we had to deliver a costed implementation plan for the G3W, which will probably help also to know how much it costs a flagship, like, instrumenting the world with greenhouse gas measurements. And it's the expert come up with a number which is 1 billion over the next 4 years in order to reach this ambitious plan. And the early warning for all is probably even larger requirements in order to protect lives and livelihood throughout the countries, because it's big ambitions, and they are all from now to 2027. So it's time is of essence in this kind of challenges. So I was really intrigued by the climate finance COP, or the finance COP, as you were mentioning.
But yeah, I'm happy to share a little bit more on that. So back in Copenhagen was when there was the initial put forth of the $100 billion goal, which the idea was that developed countries would provide $100 billion annually to support developing countries around mitigation primarily, but also adaptation in the climate space. And so the goal's never quite been met. Well, no, I shouldn't say that. I think it was just met last year. But there was general recognition that that goal was arbitrarily set as a political number, and that it was insufficient and not quite enough. And I think, one of the general discussions throughout all the conversations that happen in the climate space is that finance really underpins our ability to be successful in both globally, but also within individual states. So for example, when individual states are putting forth their own climate plans, which are referred to as NDCs, many of the developing countries will put forth what they call conditional and unconditional, right? Unconditional is what we can do. No, conditional is what we can do. Unconditional is if we're able to get more money, if we're able to get more support, we could do more. But this is, we're financially limited, or sometimes it's not just finance, it may be other technology or intellectual capacity, but we're limited in over what we're due. So given all of that, there was a call coming out of the decision text of the Paris Agreement that said we will establish a new collective quantified goal that'll build on the $100 billion number. So that's what they're trying to do, and that goal would be determined by 2025. And so they have been working over the last several years. They've been having technical expert dialogues. They're at the 11th technical expert dialogue now, where parties are working to continue to learn and to educate each other and themselves about the finance landscape. And now they're at the crunch time of what will this goal look like. So some of the things that they're debating is quantum, which is how much. And there's a debate. Developing countries would like to see a number put on the table. Developed countries want to have some other things resolved before a number is put on the table. So there's disagreement in that. There is quality of finance, or where the finance is coming from, as in source is important. Is it public finance? Is it grants? Is it loans? Is it private finance? If it's private finance, is it in a concessional form or at a market rate loan? There's a lot of concern from a lot of countries that, and not just concern, but also I shouldn't have to go into debt to deal with a problem I didn't cause. And so thinking about how loans or grants are structured, or how the allocation of funds to help support countries is structured, is really important. There's also questions of the contributor base. Kind of, if you think about this as a big pot, who's putting money into the fund? There are very strong opinions on who should be the ones contributing. It says developed countries, but the Paris Agreement expanded a little bit for developing countries to help where they can. So there are some kind of firm positions that it should only be developed countries. Let me step back. Recognizing that all countries are actually contributing in this climate finance landscape. But if we're doing a quantification of what is needed, that whose money counts, right, towards achieving this goal. And, there's different opinions of whether it should be strictly developed countries only, or it should also be developed countries plus those that also can contribute in different ways. And so those are some of those issues that they're trying to figure out. And then there's also the question of how to access the money. And then, you just got to some of the things, the other question is you're trying to figure out the quantum. They're looking at how do you develop and assess needs, looking at what are the needs in the NDCs. So I'll stop there, but it's complicated and it's going to be hard fought.
Great.
Or it has been hard fought and will continue to be.
Well, I want to be respectful of everyone's time, but thank you both. And thanks, Beth. That was a great deep dive there. And I don't know, my brain kind of hurts thinking about all the complexities of trying to figure that situation out. But
my students feel like too. I do see one more question from Sophie. How do the conversations at COP play out in your daily work? Gianpaolo, do you want to?
How do the conversation play out in your daily work? What do you expect to see after COP29? It's at COP29 we really bring the team that are part of our daily work. So we really are working with the members in order to realize the early warning for all implementation by 2027. This is the challenge WMO has set out in the last Meteorological Congress, the 19th Meteorological Congress, which took place in 2023 in May. So this is one of the key challenge, and also the Global Greenhouse Gas Watch has to reach a pre-implementation phase, let's say operationally ready by 2028. So those are what we bring at COP, but also part of our daily job at WMO. And what we are hoping is that there is a raise in ambition. So as Beth was mentioning, climate finance is one key component, but we need to be ambitious with the national determined contribution. So I think something like last week, the UN Environment Program has released what is called the GAP report. And from that report, we know that if we go with the national determined contribution as they are now, we are only address a minor fraction of the emission reduction that we should address by 2030. So ambition need to be raised, and it cannot be raised without some incentives. So there has to be incentives for the national determined contribution. So I see that is just shared in the chat, the GAP report. It is, in the preparation, you will see a lot of information shared in the web. So for instance, the WMO has shared the greenhouse gas bulletin, which I also post in the chat. So this was issued at the beginning of this week with a press conference. And we can see from all this report that we are not on track for the Paris Agreement. So we need really to raise the ambition. The IPCC has given a clear guidance that we need to limit climate change to 1.5 and to a lot less than 2 degrees warming. And in order to do that, the road is clear. It has to go through emission reduction. So the hope is really that beyond the COP29, there is action added to the words, but there are important debates at COP29. So it's, for instance, personally, I'm very, very excited by the global methane pledge that took place in COP28. And now 155 countries has already agreed to abate methane. Methane emissions are it's a powerful greenhouse gas. And also, if we abate them, if we repair the leaks, for instance, of the pipelines, there's also some savings. So there is a win-win scenarios in reducing emission from methane and seeing also an effect in the atmosphere, because the methane doesn't stay very, very long in the atmosphere. Its lifetime, it's of the order of 10 years. So it's possible to take action now and see the effect in the space of 10 years, which is also something we need to project. We need to project hope. We need to project that we can be successful in addressing the climate crisis. So methane makes me really, really hopeful. I see a lot going on from private sector, public initiative, really a lot of enthusiasm across society, from industry to private initiative. So
Thank you.
thank you.
Beth, we have a couple questions, or we have a couple minutes if you want to respond as well, or.
Yeah, I'm happy to.
Okay. Well, thank you both. Thank you both again. I really appreciate your time and expertise here today. And I know it's a very busy time probably for both of you leading up to this. I will share one more slide. Just if you are going to be at COP, please let AGU know, and we can share our list of events that we'll be involved in. Here are the ones for week 1. And week 2, I know that's probably not enough time for you to copy or maybe grab the screenshot, but I will share again this email or this website. If you let us know that you're coming to COP29, we can connect you with our AGU team who's going to be there. And with that, again, just a round of applause and thank you so much to Beth and Gianpaolo. I learned a lot. I think it's eased my election anxiety with now climate anxiety. But I really appreciated learning so much about the process and also the work that you're both doing. It's really happy to know people are fighting the good fight. I always love hearing that. So thank you both. And to those in the US, happy Halloween.